Burnett. I will bless the Lord at all times. God's praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul shall make her boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear thereof and be glad. I'm glad to be in the number this morning. As I often say on Sunday morning, if the psalmist had not written it, I would have wrote it myself. I was glad when they said unto me, let us come to Hopewell. And I thank God for what's taking place, as Reverend Sanders said, here in this place in terms of the healing and the consciousness raising of our communities. I won't tarry too long. I'll move on to our discussion for the morning, and I've been charged by my dear mentor to talk about why bother with clinical trials? Why bother with clinical trials? As African Americans, and more importantly, as African American faith leaders, why bother with clinical trials? The role of African American church leadership in clinical research and human protections. I served at Morehouse School of Medicine in the National Black Leadership Initiative on Cancer. I now serve with the Fund for Theological Education in recruitment and in the development of the next generation of leaders for the church and for the religious academy. And I've always maintained an interest throughout my professional and my personal life in the development of leadership. More specifically, I've been interested in and involved in exploring and developing the quality and effectiveness of African American leadership, especially faith leadership, with regard to its impact on the well-being of our communities, not just here, but also throughout the diaspora. And for that reason this morning, I count it a privilege, a prized privilege and a high honor to be here with you, sharing a few of my thoughts around what is and what we all know is a matter truly of life and death for our people. My hope is that by the time we finish our conversation together here this morning, that we as faith leaders will, with history in plain view, understand that and assume our responsibility for providing the kind of leadership that empowers and educates our communities to engage this process, this clinical trials process, in a way that helps us eliminate one of the greatest health challenges and one of the greatest challenges our people have ever faced. And so as we move toward that end this morning, there are a few things that I want to discuss, a few questions that I want to guide our discussion. And the first is, what is at stake here? What's at stake in this discussion of HIV/AIDS and clinical trials, first of all? Second of all, just what is a clinical trial anyway? Thirdly, what historical and historically based barriers are there that prevent African Americans from participating in clinical trials? And given the high stakes and the historical realities, what is required of African American church leadership for such a time as this? Brothers and sisters, there is no global health concern that calls more for our energies in community and church leadership, as well as our best energies in medical discovery and treatment development than HIV/AIDS. You know the figures well. Last year, over 4 million people worldwide became infected with the virus, while nearly 3 million died. Since AIDS was first discovered or identified in 1981, more than 500,000 Americans are believed to have died of AIDS. And African Americans accounted for half of these deaths. We account for 38%. Today, there are over 1 million people living with HIV/AIDS in the United States. And although we're 12% of the population, half of those folks, half of that 1 million, are black people. 1 in 50 African American males and 1 in 160 African American females are infected with the virus. And AIDS has become the leading cause of death for African American women between the ages of 25 and 34. You're familiar with these statistics. But beyond the statistics, the facts, and the figures, we see people from Sunday to Sunday, from Monday through Saturday as clergy. And we have presided over enough funerals. We visited enough patients in hospital rooms. We've counseled with enough members and engaged in enough theological debates to know firsthand the human cost and consequences of this dreaded disease. I don't need to say much more about that, do I? And so now, more than ever before, we need responsible church leadership that helps to move us to action and accountability. And since the early 80s, medically, we've witnessed tremendous strides. And we've also witnessed tremendous social strides in the black church, moving from fear to accountability, moving from anxiety to care of people living with the disease. And we've helped to improve the quality of life of people living with HIV/AIDS. However, brothers and sisters, we cannot be satisfied just to live with the disease. Eradication is the only aim that deserves our energy. And so we know that clinical research, and more specifically clinical trials, are indispensable to the modern discovery and development of medical technologies and treatments that help to alleviate human suffering. For a light example, without clinical trials, we wouldn't have the kinds of drugs that we need, like Claritin, allergy medications. And those of us who live in Atlanta, a month or two ago, we who suffer from unbearable allergies would have been left to swollen sinuses and aching heads while pollen fell from the sky like rain. Right? Clinical trials help us to solve problems and alleviate suffering. And on a more humorous note, one of my colleagues at Morehouse School of Medicine said that one of the easiest clinical trials that she ever recruited for was the Viagra study. Needless to say, she found in that study, subjects found that the benefits outweighed the risk. So she had no problem recruiting brothers for that study. So just what is a clinical trial anyway? It's important for us to have this information, to be clear about it so that we can communicate this to our people. Clinical trials are studies in which human volunteers participate in experimental treatments and or interventions to determine whether they should be made available to the larger public. That's what they are. They're guided by pre-approved protocols or research plans that describe criteria for participation in the trial, which includes the schedule of the tests, procedures, medications, dosages, and the length of the study. And clinical trials involving human subjects are federally regulated to ensure the protection of human rights and welfare. However, human protections not only involves these federal regulatory bodies, the OHRP or the FDA, but they also involve the human subject. They also involve our church members. They also involve our communities, the IRBs, the clinical research teams, the organizations, agencies, corporations, and institutions conducting research. And yes, there are both benefits and risks of participating in clinical trials. It's important to be very honest and clear about that. The National Institutes of Health talks about the fact that clinical trials that are well designed and well executed are the best approach for eligible participants to play an active role in their own health care, to gain access to new research treatments before they're widely available to the general public, to obtain medical care at leading healthcare facilities during the trial, and to help others by contributing to medical research and discovery. But yes, there are risks to clinical trials. Again, it's important to be honest and clear about that. There may be unpleasant or serious or even life-threatening side effects to experimental treatments. The experimental treatments that are given may not be effective for patients. Or the protocols may require more of a burden on time and attention than a non-protocol treatment would, including trips to the study site, treatments, hospital stays, or complex dosage requirements. But brothers and sisters, the fact is most of our medicine cabinets are testaments to the fact that clinical trials work. Our cabinets are stocked full of the outcomes of clinical trials, from Tylenol to NyQuil, Lipitor to Cialis. We routinely use products that clinical